Hello, this is Anne. Welcome to Art on the Creek. I'm showing you a view from my neighborhood. That is the Rocky Mountain Front Range in the background, and you can see we have a lot of open space areas where critters like this like to come very often. This little fox camped out in our backyard for a long time a couple of years ago, and we were filming him from inside the house. I didn't want to scare him off, but he was so comfortable that he just decided to take a nap. He stayed at our house all day that day. So it got me to thinking how much fun it would be for us to paint a red fox. Here we go. Hello again, here we are in the studio. I've already got my fox drawn on this little, it's about an 8x8 sketch pad, and you can see it's a watercolor sketch pad. I've painted the background in using just whatever was left on my palette. It just made kind of a nice blend of a warm gray. And since our fox is kind of warm in color, I thought that would be a nice little background for him. So the paints I'm using today are just my studio paints, but I've got them in a little travel palette. I wanted to have the opportunity to take them with me. It's a mix of M. Graham, Core, and Daniel Smith and Holbein. And I'm just taking my Faber-Castell eraser and lightly removing some of these dark lines that I had in my drawing, and then I'm using a dry paintbrush to brush those eraser crumbs away. I like that Faber-Castell eraser. It's dark green, so I can see where the little eraser crumbs go. And it works very well. Today I'm going to be using my Tracy Lebenson brush. This one is the one I usually use for detail because I want to go in and start with the eyes. When I'm painting animals, I either like to start with the eyes or the fur. Today I wanted to start with the eyes because to me that's a very distinctive part of the fox. Our reference photo today is from Pixabay, and I'll put a link to it. It's just such a nice close-up of the fox and much better than I could get from my living room looking out to our backyard. This sketchbook, you can see I've got some blue smudged on it from a previous page, but that won't matter at all for what we're doing today. I didn't use that many colors in this painting today. I will tell you, this is a mix of burnt sienna and lemon yellow. And then we'll use mixes of burnt sienna and indigo and a touch of yellow ochre, and that is it. We don't need a lot for this painting today. I'm just going in and filling in the irises on the eyes here with that burnt sienna, and you can see the wonderful fine line you can get with this brush. Perfect for making hairs. Usually I use this at the end, but like I said, I wanted to start with the eyes. So we need to let those dry, because we don't want to do anything else next to that, or else he'll just look very, very wrong. The paint will run together. Now I've got a little bit more lemon yellow mixed in with that burnt sienna, and we're putting a base coat down, a base wash rather, for our fox. And I'm still using this brush, and I'm kind of debating right now if I want to use it for the whole painting, because as you can see, I'm kind of trying to figure out where to place my hand. It's a little bit awkward. I'm so used to using this brush for detail, yet we will persist. This painting in particular is going to be a lot of fun because we're going to be using a lot of negative painting techniques. And I'm putting in the shadows here, but you'll notice I'm using a combination of negative painting and dry brush to really try and get those white hairs to show up. And we're putting a little bit of a darker mix of that burnt sienna and lemon yellow under the eye, adding some of that to the bridge of the nose there. Just trying to get the fox's bone structure to come out. When you're painting an animal, you want to look at highlights and shadows. Wherever there's a shadow, it's where the bone structure will go in, and the highlights will be where the bone structure or fatty tissue is raised. So the eyes on this fox need to actually sit inside the skull. So we need to be wary of that when we're painting. And we're just continuing to go around with that lemon yellow burnt sienna mix, and then under the eye here we're going to add, I think this is just pure burnt sienna that I go in with to really set that eye into the skull. And in our picture, I believe the right side of the fox's face, so it would be the left side of our painting, is quite a bit in shadow, comparatively speaking, there we go, to the other side of his face. So now we're using just some more of those hair-like brush strokes. Painting animals is my favorite thing to do. I love painting fur, and I've given up on that Lebenzen brush for now, and I've gone in with my Princeton Neptune, and you can see I've splayed out the bristles to get the hair going. I wanted to get the shadow under his chin. So by using the shadows, by painting the shadows in first and using that splayed brush technique, I can easily figure out where the white hairs are on the fox. So we're just going to go in and get a few more of those shadow hairs here on the side of his face, his cheek. And always going in the direction of the fur. I know that sounds a little obvious, but it is something that a lot of people don't think about. So you always want to paint in the direction that the fur grows when you're painting animal fur. Just kind of playing around with these shadows. This is a mix of burnt sienna and indigo. Both of those are Daniel Smith colors. And now I want to go and get this negative painting into the ears. The ears have black skin on the inside, but the fur around there is white. So you're going to see these spaces that are created from that white fur looking down into the black skin. Now I've switched to my other Lebenzen brush. This one will be just perfect for the majority of the painting. And we're adding in the base wash for that dark fur on the back of the fox's ear. Going in there to line the side where he's got that thin strip of black fur. And the thing about this brush is it's so great for painting in hair. And this little sketchbook, unfortunately, it's discontinued. I got it from St. Louis Art Supply, and I've got an email in of asking them if it's 100% cotton or if it's a cellulose. But unfortunately, they're not making them anymore. I guess the woman who worked for them and did the bindings, she's the only one that knew how to do the bindings, and they were really fussy, so they decided that it was not economically feasible for them to continue to make this sketchbook, which is in a way too bad because I really like it. I bought it quite a while ago, and I just recently opened it up. The paper feels like cotton, so I really don't know. Just going in with varying levels of those few colors I mentioned, and now adding some of that negative painting technique to create the cheek fur there. And just continually warming up the temperatures, creating those shadows and bone structure elements to our little fox. And that his right eye, the one on our left, is quite receded. It's almost hidden behind his nose. So we'll keep that in mind when we're finishing that up. We'll go and get the next layer of wash in, keeping some of those fur-like strokes evident. Going up into the ear with some of that golden red fur. And again, that is the mix of the burnt sienna and lemon yellow. Getting the rim of the ear in. This brush is just one of my favorites. It's so easy to use, and it just, like I said, for fur, it just really just makes it come just so naturally, so you have to do very little work. That's my favorite way to paint, is when you can let the paper and the paint do the work for you. And this is a really good watercolor sketchbook, and I really love this brush too, because it helps the paints do what they need to do very effortlessly. And you can see with every time I go in with some of this paint mixture here, we just get a little bit more detail in the fur, a little bit more nuances. And that's just continually what we're looking for. Some dry brush there. Now this is a bit more of a brown tone to that mix, kind of a warm gray. Now we're going to work on the mouth. And it was so funny because when I got to this point in the painting, I realized foxes really do smile. His the curvature of his lip really does go up in a little smile at the end. And I'm trying to catch some of the hairs underneath his nose there. Now, when you're painting dog noses, canine noses, they're flat on the top, which is why I'm going left to right up there on the top. And then their nostrils, there's typically a highlight on the lower edge of the nostril. So I'm going to try and remember that and pick that up in this painting here so that we can be sure and have all of that information there. Just finalizing some of the details. Of that lip there. And we'll come back and make it a little bit darker. What I wanted to get the chin hairs in. Again, this is a good example of the negative painting because you're not painting in white hairs. I'm painting in the shadows in between the hairs. So if you can imagine, you're painting what's not there. Does that make sense? It's kind of like those old optical illusion pictures where you would stare at something for a while and then see what you see. Well, when you're painting what's not there, your eye will catch what actually is there. I hope that makes sense. With fur, it works especially well. Now we're getting the shadows in that nostril. You can see I've left the shades of the nose uneven, and that is on purpose. That is so that you can see the texture in the nose and the dimension. And now I've got the little slit there on the side of the nostril, and now we're darkening this portion on the front here where that would be in shadow at the most. And we'll come in and catch up the other side with that and make that highlight just a touch bit smaller. You can see this brush is really good for detail like that. And the dry brush technique is excellent to use on animal noses, especially when you have a cold press paper like this, because it will really highlight the textures and bumps that are in, especially dog noses, bears, whoever else has a nose like that. I suppose cats do too. I associate their noses as being a little bit different. So now here I'm putting in the negative painting, the hair technique, the negative painting technique to establish the hairs around his nose. A little bit more on his muzzle there. And now I notice there is a shadow, and I know that that's quite dark. We'll go in, I've got quite a juicy bit of paint there, and I wanted to get that shadow in, but now I'm going to go in and blot that off, and then it's just the perfect value. I do that a lot when I'm painting portraits. I'll go in with a very thin wash of something and then blot it off so that we can establish the correct value. Now we'll go in and get the fur around the eyes. This first stroke here is a bit like eyeliner. And then we'll, at the corner of the eye there, I'm using that negative painting technique again to paint what's not there. I'm actually painting the skin underneath the hair, especially on this lower eye. I hope you can see that. Maybe if you're watching on a small mobile device, you can zoom in and catch that. And now the pupil, leaving space for the highlight, always leaving space for the highlight. And if you don't, you can go in later with a white pen and add that highlight in. And then I realized that I do have his expression here is a little too surprised. In our reference photo, it was more of a tired look on his eye, like he was either squinting in the sun or about ready to take a nap. So I wanted to close that eye just a little bit. And now we'll put in some of the shadows. Now you can't tell in the photography because of the lighting, but that is more of cerulean blue. There's the additional color I used. Sorry, I didn't mention that one before. It's a thin wash of cerulean blue to create the shadow on the eye. And then we'll blot that out. And now you can see the blue definitely. And now we'll take that burnt sienna and pull the iris down to the bottom. And there you have it. That eye is complete. Now I'm going to go in and work on this other eye here. Now I will tell you, this was a real mental gymnastics for my brain here. This angle is so, I wanted to keep the painting straight for you guys, but when I put my hand in front of it, the camera will focus on my hand. So I had to kind of paint it at an odd angle and not look at the fox's other eye, because the angles of these eyes are so different that it was really kind of playing tricks on me. So I had to really focus just on this eye on this side when I was painting it, because it's such a different angle from the first eye we did. We'll get that lower rim in. Same principles here, same technique. I did intentionally go in with a lighter wash this time because I wanted to make sure that I had it set in the skull the way that I wanted it. And now you can see with that darker shadow, that just really makes that eye recede. Creating the rim and leaving a highlight on the rim. Highlights are another good way to show moisture on an animal's nose or eyes. And now we're getting that pupil in. And this eye in general is a little bit darker than our other eye because it's in the shadow portion of our reference photo. But I do want to hit that with a heat tool because I want to go in and get the shading just right. And I don't want to smudge the eye, make him look like a zombie. Zombie foxes. So we'll make sure that's very dry. And now we'll finish up the pupil, get that nice and dark. And those hairs around the tear duct area. And we'll come in with that blue, just like we did on the other eye, to create the shadows on the whites of the eye. And now we'll get back to the fur here, now that the eyes are done. He does have a dark spot under the tear duct of his eye there. Kind of lending that all to recede into the tear duct area of the skull. And just continuing to push that third layer of glaze, of pigment, around. I've gone a little darker so that those lighter areas will show through. It still is a mixture of that burnt sienna, and now I've got a little bit of yellow ochre on the nose. I wanted to give it a little more ruddy quality to that yellow. Just continuing to add some of that fur and layer it in. Get that eye set in some more. Catch those shadows up to the rest of the values. And again, like all of the other paintings, I've explained that it's kind of like fine-tuning your TV set. You're always adjusting values, tones, trying to get, once you paint something, then that'll change the value of the other things. So that's kind of why I wanted to do the eyes first and have that background done first, so that I knew you got to have some anchor somewhere to start from, and then you can do less tweaking as you go along. But I am famous for continuing to tweak. So now I'm trying to get that shadow down to make his nose emerge forward from the side of his chest there. That would be, I guess, he's got his head turned. And then we'll hit that with a heat tool. And now we're putting in just some more of that hair detail underneath the chin, getting those shadows a little more, putting a little more depth into those shadows, rather. Now I'm splaying apart the bristles. We're going to work on these ears here. With this brush, with this brush, excuse me, I didn't really need to do that. And in fact, the bristles just went right back together where they wanted to be. But again, this is a great way to watch the negative painting. By painting in these narrow lines of a darker pigment, and again, this is the indigo mixed with the burnt sienna, what I'm really creating are the white hairs that go down inside the ear. So with the angle of how you hold your brush and the value of pigment that you have on there, you can create all kinds of wonderful fur, feathers, anything like that with negative painting. It's a technique I rely on a lot, and I really use it. And I think once you play with it a little bit, you'll be really happy to use it too. Now I'm noticing that the black fur around the edge of his ears just sticks up ever so slightly. So we're going to roughen up that line all around his ear just to kind of make that a little more realistic. And if you've been watching my videos for a while, you'll know that I don't paint realistically. I tend to be much looser in my style, which I really like. I like looking at the brush strokes more than a photographically real painting. I'm impressed beyond belief that people can actually paint that way. But that's not my style. It never has been. So if you have a more detailed style, that's wonderful. Don't change your style. Don't try to paint exactly like I am. Just continue what you're doing. Now we're putting in some brown on that ear to kind of give it some depth and have it attached to the head, putting some shadows around. This is more of the burnt sienna, a little less yellow in it. These colors are probably my absolute favorite, and I use them a lot. Burnt sienna, indigo, and yellow ochre. I use those colors so often. And when I'm painting a landscape, I guess I would add either an ultramarine, a French ultramarine, or a manganese or cerulean blue. But yeah, I really love, for a red that I would go to a lot would be alizarin crimson. But when I paint animals, I really like to use a potter's pink on their nose because that color granulates so wonderfully that it does the texture for you. We're just going in and putting in some individual hair detail. And now on this ear too. Going in and making that black on his ear back there just a little deeper. Some dry brush there and pulling the negative painting in to get the white hairs of the ear to stand out. You've seen her in a couple of my videos. We have a Shiba, our dog, Sasha. And when she was a puppy, everyone would ask, "Oh, is that a fox? Is that a fox?" No, it's not a fox. I think some people do have foxes for pets. We aren't one of those people, but if you know someone who has a fox for a pet, kind of interesting. I don't know, maybe it was a rescue maybe, and I'd like to know some stories about that. So if you know someone who has a fox, or if you have a fox, tell me about it. How did you get the fox? How did it come into your life? I know that they're very social and very loyal, just like a lot of dogs and just like our Sasha. So here we go on that ear, just finishing that up and put that layer of brown in there to catch the brown hairs that were coming in, the burnt sienna. And now just finally fixing up these shadows here on his other ear. And I think that looks pretty good for now. So now we'll add the whiskers in. This is where this brush really excels. You can literally paint a hair width because you're using these goat hair fibers and synthetic goat hair fibers that are just so wonderful. And you can see I went in with the wrong angle there. So I just blotted that out, and now I'm putting in the fine lines of the whiskers, and we'll rotate it back around and get a couple more in. Getting all those whiskers. A few there come out of his chin. You don't want to overdo it with the whiskers, but you don't want to do too few either. And we'll darken up a little bit on his nose and just get that shading just right underneath there. I just want to give him a good once over here. And I think he's done, but I bet you after I sign it, I'll go ahead and do more. So here I am signing him. And I'm taking one more look. And actually, when I do go back in, there it is, I'm picking up the brush. When I do go back in, I was pretty happy with the little detail touch-ups that I did. I noticed he needed just a little bit more around his eye. And since that's really the stunning part of this fox, I really wanted to make sure I had those exactly the way I wanted them. So we'll tweak those just a little bit. And then we're going to tweak around his mouth a bit. I decided to, instead of that line where his little smile is, that he needed some negatively painted hairs there along his lip to show that the hair was coming down over his lip. And then I saw a space over here that needed some more. I'm just not done. But now I think it's good. So that's our fox today. I hope you enjoyed him, and I hope if you paint this fox, you'll tag me on Instagram. Thanks for joining us today. We'll see you next time.